Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jerry Krishnan. If you all could take your seats, we're going to get started. So first, good afternoon and welcome to the latest in our UI Health Distinguished Scholars Series. So many of you know I don't usually read things because I'm pretty good off the cuff, but Eileen's made me very nervous. I feel like I need to pay attention here. So if you're seeing me paying attention, it's because I think Eileen's done such an amazing job, then I want to make sure I don't let her down. So before I forget, because there's always questions and conversations we're going to have, I'd like everyone just to give a round of applause to Eileen Baker and Michael Westbecker for organizing. Okay, so my name is Jerry Krishnan. I think I know many of you, or most of you here. I'm the Associate Vice Chancellor for Population Health Sciences at the University of Illinois. I'm also a Professor of Medicine in the Division of Pulmonary Critical Care Medicine, and also serve as the Professor of Medicine in Department of Epidemiology Biostatistics. I am welcoming you on behalf of Dr. Bob Barish. He will join us virtually for a small session later this morning, but as many of you, this afternoon, but as many of you know, he usually gives the welcoming remarks. And Dr. Barish wanted me to convey that he apologized that he had a personal conflict, but really wishes all of you well, and hopefully an opportunity for all of us to learn from Dr. Yancey. So the Office of the Vice Chancellor for Health Affairs, for many of you that are new here, recognize that it is essentially the coordinating unit for the entire care delivery system, hospital, multiple clinics, and an entire network of federally qualified healthcare centers. And also all of the deans of the health sciences colleges report to Dr. Barish. And I think I see several deans in the audience. Dr. Crespo, it's a pleasure to see you, and others. So thank you for being here today. I want to point out, though, that the Distinguished Scholar C is a little bit unusual in the sense that while this is led by the Office of Vice Chancellor for Health Affairs, it's done in coordination with our healthcare system, and in particular, our Chief Medical Officer, our Chief Clinical Officer, Chief Nursing Officer, Chief Quality Officer, Chief of Diversity and Community Health Equity Officer, and Ronnie is joining me here today representing that group. So it really is intended to be at the apex of the care delivery system. How do we have conversations that are important for us to have? We are super excited today that this is our first in-person Distinguished Scholar Series since we started this a few years ago. Something called the COVID pandemic got in the way, and we are super excited that Dr. Clyde Yancey agreed to join us today. You're in for quite a show. I've already been impressed with the fact that he's going to do whatever he wants to do today, and so I'm going to do my best to keep us moving. But really, you're going to, I think, learn a lot. I've already been learning quite a bit. There's also a number of people who are joining live stream, so we're going to try really hard to speak in our mic. And if you do have questions, there will be a mic coming to you, and do your best to use the mic when you're answering, and speak a little more slowly if needed. This series is intended to offer an opportunity to learn from and share with nationally and frankly internationally recognized healthcare leaders. So I'd like to offer a very special welcome to our distinguished guest today, Vice Dean for Diversity and Inclusion, Chief of Cardiology in the Department of Medicine, and Professor of Medicine and Medical Social Sciences at Northwestern Medicine, Dr. Clyde Yancey. A round of applause, please. Anyone who knows Dr. Yancey, I think, will agree with me that he is very busy. He has a really shall I say, full schedule. So it's really an honor, Dr. Yancey, that you took some time to be with us today, and we thank you, and we look forward to learning from you. The goal here is really to learn from leaders like Dr. Yancey, and for us to also describe to him what we do, what's our mission, what are the areas we're working on, and hopefully he leaves us today knowing a little bit more about us, and likewise, we also leave today learning a little bit more about Dr. Yancey and how he's made it, so to speak, or what he's working on next, and what part of his future can we be part of as well. It's been very exciting to see the seminar series come to fruition. Several years ago, I think many of you know, I was approached by our Vice Chancellor for Health Affairs, Dr. Barish, with the idea of engaging healthcare thought leaders from across the nation in meaningful dialogue so that we can share in their expertise and with our local community to serve our patients better. So our goal here really is to translate some of the conversation we're having today to actual action. So think about that as you think about the kinds of questions we want to ask. Dr. Barry specifically told me, no slides, Dr. Krishnan. This is a conversation. And really the idea is to host a more intimate conversation. Today, really with Michael Westbecker's and Eileen's help, we're actually gathering as a community. This was the goal a few years ago. So if you feel a little bit close to your neighbors, it's intentional. It's to build community, to build dialogue, to build friendship. All of you have things in common. So if you've not had a chance to interact with each other, please do that today, if not during this exact session, shortly afterwards. You have a lot in common. We all have, actually, a lot in common with each other. Today's conversation is an exceptional opportunity to engage another national leader from a peer academic health enterprise. You might know there's a university called Northwestern, not too far away, one of our peers. We're here to learn and gain deeper insights through his work and experiences. So it's with great pleasure on behalf of Dr. Bob Barash, our Vice Chancellor for Health Affairs, that we welcome you as our distinguished scholar today and really for a fireside chat, and I think you'll see some fireworks, I believe. So a little bit about Dr. Yancey, and really we had to cut it down. There was quite a bit to say, so I'm going to try to abbreviate his many accomplishments. So first, he received his medical degree from Tulane University School of Medicine in 1982. After medical school, he completed his residency at Parkland Memorial Hospital in internal medicine in 1985. As someone from Texas, we always thought about Parkland as a national leader, a place that trained amazing clinicians. So Dr. Yancey represents part of that pedigree. He then went on to UT Southwestern Medical Center, where he completed fellowships in cardiology in 1989, cardiovascular physiology research, training in the labs of Mitchell and Blomquist, and then, like I said, there's a lot to say. Advanced heart failure transplant in 1990. He then, because education is something he believes so strongly in, decided he needed a master's degree in medical management. And for many of you who have risen through the academic chain, you realize your training may be in one thing, but as your career progresses, time to learn or relearn or to broaden your area of expertise into people and how to manage and how to lead. Dr. Yancey is currently the Vice Dean of Diversity and Inclusion at Northwestern. He also serves as Chief of Cardiology, as I mentioned, and Associate Director of the Bloom Cardiovascular Institute of Northwestern Memorial Hospital. He holds the Magenstat Endowed Professor of Medicine chair and also an appointment as Professor of Medical Social Sciences. His research interests includes heart failure, clinical guideline generation, outcome sciences, personalized medicine, and healthcare disparities. Each of these are careers, and he works on all of these careers. Over 700 peer-reviewed publications with an H-index of over 115. Let's just say that's one of the most highly cited scientific authors worldwide. This is a very rare number of people have accomplished that level of scholarship. He's also the deputy editor of JAMA Cardiology, senior section editor for heart failure for the Journal of American College of Cardiology, serves on multiple boards. I won't read all of them. He's a former president of the American Heart Association, an elected member of the National Academy of Medicine, and a member of the American Association of Physicians. He has multiple roles across multiple groups within the federal infrastructure, FDA, NIH, NHLBI, and so forth. Clearly someone who the nation looks to in times of need. I recently had the chance to work alongside him, and as part of the steering committee, he was the chair for the Committee on Collaborating Network of Networks for evaluating COVID-19 therapeutic strategies, a lot of words, essentially called CONNECTS, which is a major NIH initiative for the design and implementation of multiple adaptive clinical trials for COVID-19. So for those of you that have had COVID-19 or family members or friends who've been treated with medications, in part we owe that to Dr. Yancey's work, chairing that on behalf of the nation, ensuring that we brought some of the discoveries forward to actually help people in times of need. So that's my quick introduction, really quick introduction. I'm now going to also very briefly introduce, because you all know these individuals, Dr. Terry Vandenhoek, my friend also professor and head of Department of Emergency Medicine. He's had many titles, and I think I won't read all of them. And of course, Ronnie Morrison-Williams, our Chief Diversity and Community Health Officer. So with that as a background, again, one more announcement. It's being live streamed, so to the extent to which you want to say something, raise your hand and we'll bring a mic to you during the appropriate times. Michael will bring it over there. So with that, I'm going to ask my first question, just to kick us off. We'll do a little bit of, asking Dr. Yancey, that kind of thing. So I've said a lot of things about you, Dr. Yancey, and most of it is true, I think. So what, if anything, you'd like to share that's more personal, that perhaps people don't realize?
Probably the first, Jerry, thank you for this opportunity, and thank all of you. I mean, I know everyone in here has something else on your agenda today, and you've taken the time to come and be a part of this conversation. And I delight in the idea that this is a conversation and not a presentation. And as we're starting that conversation, and Jerry gives me the license to say something that's not in my CV or not on the bio from which you read, I will tell you that I'm a little bit lighter than I typically am. I'm standing a little bit taller than I typically do because my younger daughter is newly married. That was on New Year's Eve in New Orleans. It was a spectacular moment, but what made it so spectacular was that she decided to wed within 4 miles of the place where her mother was born. And that's important because I lost my first wife when my daughters were 6 and 7. And I spent about 20 years as a single parent just trying to enrich their lives and help them reach their pinnacle, whatever that happened to be. And for her to go home and have her wedding there, and to reach out to family members, distant and near, so that we could all have that celebration. It was pretty remarkable, and I'm still floating a little bit because that was just a terrific moment. I mean, of everything else I've done, the two things that I cherish the most are my 2 daughters. Just no question about that.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Yancey. Round of applause, maybe? Sounds... so I think, Ronnie, I think you had the next question.
And I'm trying to manage my own emotions, Dr. Yancey, as you just hit a few things with your personal discovery that hit home for me. I have 2 daughters that are my world. I went to school in Baton Rouge, so down the street from New Orleans. I love beignets, but and I spent a long time as a single parent as well, so I appreciate your disclosures on so many levels, and really thank you for that. As we think about your day-to-day and your career and your professional life, what inspires you in your daily work, besides your daughters?
You know, that's the easiest question that anyone could raise. And I would say not only what inspires me, but what should inspire you. There should be a cause du jour as you awaken each day. There should be a reason you want to walk to the office. There should be a passion you have for what you do. I'm someone who can't wait to get to the office in the morning after my gym session, and I stay as long as possible. I'm the last guy out of the office every night. I'm on a first-name basis with the staff that supports our offices because I just don't know when to stop, and it's because I love what I do. If you can find, particularly for the early career individuals, whether it's science, administration, any domain, if you can find that thing that you do that drives you, that's always in your subconscious, you wake up Saturday morning thinking about it, then you found your niche. And that's what gets me up every morning, that sense of having an investment, not just an activity, but an investment in what it is we're trying to do. Jerry correctly identified that, I am busy. My calendar has shades of pink in virtually every time slot. But I don't like to think of it as being busy. I like to think of it as being intentional. I want to be certain that our journal does well. I want to be certain our diversity efforts are doing correctly. I want to be certain that I'm mentoring my early career faculty and we're moving forward. I want to be certain our research enterprises are going exactly where they need to go. I want to be certain that my own academic work is bringing other people in, giving other people credit, moving other people along. So it's this sense of being very intentional, which translates as being busy, but it's this sense of purpose and passion that really drives me every day. I'm also trying to find good gumbo in Chicago. I think I found a place, I don't want to do an advertorial, but I think I found a place that's got good gumbo in Chicago.
So you can come by to the stage later if you want to know what he found. Okay. Dr. Vandenhoek.
Well, Dr. Yancey, I want to thank you for taking the time to have this conversation today at UI Health, and welcome. Thanks. My question is, so you have so many accomplishments. What is your most impactful achievement to date that you would highlight?
Terry, I must have slipped you a quarter before we started because I'm delighted that, again, just like Jared, you've given me a license. The thing that I love the most has nothing to do with publications or titles or accolades. Here in Chicago, 12 years ago, we reached out to George Westinghouse College Prep on the west side of the city and engaged them in an enrichment experience where we go to the school, we identify 6 or 7 ninth graders, and then bring them onto our campus every summer, what we call the Summer Intensive Program. We've been doing it for 12 years. Every one of my, and I call them my kids, every one of my kids has graduated from high school. This is a community that you understand. 75% come from college-naive families. No one in the immediate family has ever gone to college. And 70% are in school lunch assistance programs. These children grow up right in front of me. They go from being shy, inarticulate, to being candidates for top schools, top universities in the country. Everyone has graduated. All but 2 have gone on to college with full scholarships, including Ivy League schools. And my first kid is in medical school right now, and several more prepping to go. And these are kids that would have never had this opportunity. So I don't want an award for it, but the satisfaction I get when I see them and I sit down and work with them, it's pretty remarkable when you can see their eyes. Because when I see that ninth grader's eyes light up because someone's taken the time to introduce them to a career in science, I didn't have that when I was a ninth grader. I just had like this dream that I wouldn't let go. But how many other people had that same dream and never actualized it because there was no one saying, let me just enlighten you. Not let me give you anything. Let me just enlighten you and help you see where you need to go. So that's the thing. That's the thing that I really cherish.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yancey. We've heard a little bit about your personal aspirations and accomplishments, impact. You're also in this room with a lot of leaders. Many of the people here are leaders, and in fact, all of you are leaders. You may be leading yourself, you may be a leader in your family, in your neighborhood. So all of us are leaders here. So as you kind of think about that frame of mind, leadership, what do you think are some of the major issues facing leaders in academic medicine today?
So really an important question. But the first thing I'll say about leadership is that you don't do it because you get a 2-page bio. That's not why you do it. It's not about being self-centered. It's about being selfless, not being selfish, but selfless. Once leaders are of that mindset, then it's about elevating others and celebrating others. And unfortunately, what happens in academic medicine is that we have these hierarchical systems. A lot of power is concentrated in a few offices. And what really successful leaders do is first they surround themselves with people with better skill sets. They empower people. They resource people so those people can rise to the next level. And so I think what we have to do is, yes, be aware of the exigencies of the day. We've got terrible fiscal challenges. We're constantly trying to make certain that we are playing by the rules in all of the HR domains, and that's a loaded statement. But the most important thing is that if you are a leader in medicine or any other field, what you really are doing is leading people. And if you're leading people and you have a selflessness about leadership, you're already 60% of where you need to be successful. So if you can continue to think about people, and even in the midst of what we're facing, if you can find that person to elevate, give them the responsibility, coach them to success, let them feel the joy of owning an initiative, navigating the initiative, and seeing it to fruition, that's great. I covet finishers, people that start a project and will finish it. There are a lot of smart people in medicine. That's no longer the asset that we seek. Everybody's smart. I'm looking for the smart person that's a finisher. We can get something done then. So I think that no matter what the issue is in front of us as leaders, we need to elevate people. And we're much closer to being successful than not.
Ronnie, I think you're next.
I am. Dr. Yancey, what strategies do you use to create equity and inclusion in your health system and in research?
Well, now this is a very important question, particularly as I look at a kaleidoscope of faces in this audience, because there's some faces in this audience where this conversation gives you a little bit of heartburn. It makes you wonder, okay, all of a sudden I'm going to be targeted. And there are other people in this audience that hear this conversation and say, yeah, that's right, we need to do something about this. This is not a good thing. So the real key strategy is communication and dealing with issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion like we deal with issues of science. What's the history? What are the root causes? What's the pathophysiology? What are the interventions? Where's the evidence? What works? Stunningly, there is that body of information about issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. But if you start on the back end and every comment is an emotive comment, it's very hard to get where you need to be. But if you start on the front end and say, let's inform ourselves, let's elevate the discussion as if we have an issue on the table, it's like a disease process. And let's think about the science, think about the theory, and then understand what are the opportunities, what are the options. It's a very different kind of conversation. But I've always dealt with some of the most difficult conversations in this space by being very forthright, bringing the information to the table as information, not as feeling. And if you can do that, because here's a key consideration. If you're dealing with issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, one strategy is to understand your end game before you start. If your end game is to make someone feel a different way, we can't manage another adult's feelings. But if your end game is to change the behavior, we can measure behaviors. And so you start with yet a different sort of strategy by thinking where you want to be. You're not going to get a bunch of converts. This isn't religion. But you will get different behaviors. And that's what's most important. So information, deal with it very transparently. Peel back the emotive part so that people can have comfortable conversations, because it is an uncomfortable topic. I heard something just this weekend that was very important to me. The skill that you need to have, Ronnie, as a leader in diversity and inclusion, the skill that I try to work on is how can I make comfortable people feel uncomfortable without them walking out of the room? And how can I take uncomfortable people and give them a sense of hope? If I can do those two things, then we can have the conversations and move forward. But the real skill is how can you take comfortable people, make them feel uncomfortable, but in a way that keeps them engaged.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Dr. Vandenhoek?
Yeah, so this has been a remarkable last few years. We've all gone through some pretty challenging times, and there are still changes going on. And I guess one question that I think all of us would be very interested in is, how do you stay optimistic?
So, Terry, we know each other, so I can do this. But if I look at everyone in this audience, that preamble starts almost every conversation. The last couple of years have been tough. We've been through hell. This has been so very hard. You know what? The last couple of years have been remarkable. They have been incredible. They have been enlightening. Why? Because you've seen the resiliency of the human spirit. You've seen what happens when people speak up with a strong voice and say what they believe in, no matter how objectionable it is. And we're still a country. We're still a city in Chicago. We're still at this life effort trying to make it work. I celebrate the fact that we've gone through tense moments and we have learned more about each other than we ever knew. We've made pivots faster than we've ever pivoted. 2 walls from here in this fairly qualified health center, 2 walls from here are a number of posters about how avidly you embrace telehealth and how much care you provided. That was an overnight pivot, and we did it. And so there's nothing good about the pandemic and nothing good about the social disruption. But I celebrate the fact that there's something about the resiliency of people that allowed us to get through this and to merge with a different awareness. I love this notion of that which has been seen can never be unseen, and that which has been heard can never be unheard. We all are functioning from a different perspective now, and we're getting to a place that we would have taken a decade to get to. So it was tragic, it was miserable, but in the midst of all of this, I celebrate what I'm learning about the human spirit.
Great. Thank you so much. I think our next question actually comes from someone in the audience, Dr. Michelle Mariscalco. So I'm going to let her read her question. But while the mic is going there, I think you can see why Dr. Yancey was selected to be the chair of the Connect Steering Committee. For those of you that I think can imagine, we were in a crisis mode trying to understand how to treat acute COVID. Many of you were in hospital rooms or in clinics or were dealing with very sick individuals in your family or friends. And through all that, Dr. Yancey was able to create a sense of calm, that we had the right people around the table. We're going to walk through this together. We're going to problem solve and then be on time. And Dr. Yancey runs really efficient meetings too. So I think that that part of us, our role as leaders is to exude leadership and demonstrate leadership. And that has to do with how we react to circumstances we can't predict. And I think you're hearing some of that today in his language. So I was giving a little bit of time so that Dr. Mariscalco could get her mic. There we go. Okay. So would you like to introduce yourself, Dr. Mariscalco, and then I believe you have a question.
I do.
Okay, all right.
Thank you very much.
It's good to see you again.
Nice to see you. Michelle Mariscalco, for those of you who don't know me, professor of pediatrics, pediatric critical care by training, but the last 12 years I've been doing my administrative journey, and an assistant vice chancellor for health affairs. So as with Jerry, I work for Dr. Bob Barish. So Dr. Yancey, you have the vision of the need for integrative health, right? And certainly your heart failure team can exude it up and down. A lot of the work that we do here at UI Health, our federally qualified health center, our hospital and clinics, is, again, team-based and team-based work, or we like to think we do that. Tell us, in your experience, as we develop our teams, what people do we forget to bring into that group?
Patients.
As a temper?
That's an easy question, and I don't mean to belittle it, but it gets to a theme that was on the table as I was visiting with the T32 trainees. It's very, very important to learn how to listen when you're crossing, if you will, a chasm and reaching out to a different group, community, or a different group of peers, or persons with a different skill set. Just being able to engage and listen to others in this integrative model, it really is bringing the patient voice into this. I had the opportunity to be on the ground floor and helped start PCORI back in 2010. And I was on the methodology committee where we developed the methods to do patient-centered outcomes research. And our whole governance was research done differently. That was our mantra, research done differently. I have to tell you, when we got groups of patients in the room, if you will, collated according to disease circumstances, and just sat and listened, I heard things I had never heard before. I mean, I had to stop one day and say, look, I've been doing clinical trials for 25 years at that point, and not a single clinical trial, not a single one, had we ever started after we spoke to the patient population to find out what they wanted us to do in the clinical trial. We always did what we thought would be a clever idea, a good idea, made sense scientifically. But we never paused and said, let's talk to the patient first and see what they need. And the best example of this is work done by a friend of mine that I lost in 2017, but we were colleagues in medical school at Tulane and colleagues on the faculty at UT Southwestern in cardiology. His name was Ron Victor. And Ron had this idea in Dallas, this little short white Jewish guy, let's go to South Dallas and go into barbershops and see if we can check blood pressures. I'm like, are you crazy? So we went together. And I mean, as long as we just said we're here to help and we just shut up, I mean, we birthed this idea of the barbershop blood pressure check. In fact, I wrote an editorial, a bald, fade, and BP check, because we went in the communities, we figured out what they wanted, we trained the barbers how to take blood pressures, and now this is one of the most sterling examples of community engagement for the greater good. It's probably the most effective way we've ever controlled blood pressure in an African American community, by getting away from Northwestern and UIC and even this FQHC and going to the barbershop with PharmDs and with barbers and completely blowing it out of the water with blood pressure control. So you got to engage the patients in any integrative model. You have to.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Yancey. I think given the business that we're in, which is a noble profession, this idea of helping others, in times of need and when health, when people are in crisis, I think we've all had family members, friends, perhaps ourselves, to remember that it's all about the patient. So I'm going to go a little bit off the cuff here because we're actually a little ahead of time. I was nervous having too many questions, but actually I'm going to do a little audible, and I hope the individual that's going to get called up doesn't feel too pressured here, but someone in the design team here, someone in the Institute for Healthcare Delivery Design who spent some time putting together the telehealth strategy that Dr. Yancey just mentioned. I think there's Jennifer Peterson's here. I see Hugh Music. I see a few people here. Do you want to take the mic and just say a little bit about maybe what you heard that was surprising when you brought people together, including patients, that I'm not sure that clinicians may have realized or administrators may have realized? Anything you want to add, maybe a question to Dr. Yancey about telehealth, if you do proper stakeholder engagement. So this is an audible. Does anyone want to say anything? So Hugh.
Well, I guess.
Okay, I guess and I left some options on the table, but so maybe a comment and then maybe a question. Hugh.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Yancey, for everything. I'm like Ronnie. I'm very touched by your story. I mean, parenthood, I think, is the end-all, be-all. So I really appreciate that. We are human-centered designers working within a healthcare context, and so healthcare systems are oriented toward efficiency and consistency in delivery. And I think one of the things that we discovered in how telehealth was being deployed was simply as a substitute for in-person care, because it had certain attributes that allowed for efficiency. What we discovered by going out and talking with patients and providers is that everybody loved it. What we ran into as a really interesting conflict is it doesn't work well with the business model. And as a result of that, you had high demand for something that in many ways people preferred to existing modes of healthcare delivery, but it's not sustainable in its current instantiation because of the payer system. And so on that basis, what we tried to think about was we need to move beyond thinking of it simply as a replacement for the traditional in-person exchange that happens within the exam room, and think of the potential of telemedicine as a way to augment and advance the sorts of relationships that can exist between providers and patients, but also do something beyond the way that we currently work. We only got there by actually having conversations with people and having them share with us in a very authentic way the tensions that they were confronting and trying to reconcile those things. So when you spoke about communication, it had a lot of resonance, and I think a lot of the work that's done here in the Institute for Healthcare Delivery Design is centered around meaningful and effective communication. So that's a comment. Jerry, do you want a follow-up question?
Yeah, if you had a question, Hugh, sure.
Okay. So,
Well, Hugh, before you do that,
Yeah.
though,
He's going to ask you a question, I think, so.
you made a statement that merits a little bit more discussion, because 3 times you used the word efficiency. And I think we might change the frame here and recognize that healthcare delivery systems, by design, are inefficient for the patient. They are efficient for people like me, because I can go to my office and the patients are scheduled and the team is in place, and I can go through whatever that day's calendar of visits happens to be. But that's efficiency for just one user, and not efficiency for the ultimate user, because the ultimate user has to take a day off from life, whether it's work or life, has to find a place to park at whatever outrageous fees they're being charged, has to find something to eat that will not be heart healthy, has to then wait, and almost assuredly the visit will not happen promptly on time. One of my former colleagues is in the room. I won't make eye contact. I don't want to embarrass anybody, but I'll just say I'm better now than I was then. But I'm just saying that by definition, it's a terribly inefficient process for the person that ultimately has to use it. And I think the real benefit of telehealth is this: even if I am very active in following somebody that is longitudinally, I might see them 5 times a year. Then what happens the other 360 days of the year? They still have high blood pressure. They still have heart failure. And so this evolution of a different way of communicating with patients that is more efficient for the patient is something that we need to embrace. Now, the question is, how do we use it correctly? And the business model thing is really about leaders getting together and thinking about where are our priorities? What's our expected return on investment for the procedures we do versus the care we provide? Those are high-level conversations that happen in rooms to which I'm not always privy, but that's another part of this equation. So I would say, think about this concept of efficiency, and let's see how we can make it efficient for the patient.
I think you may have just answered my question, which is, with the potential of technology, how do we create a healthcare delivery system that's more geared toward people?
So I really love this dimension as well, because one of my concerns about the ease of using technology to answer this question is that the technology, unfortunately, carries forward and promulgates the same bias that is active in the clinic exchanges. If the information base upon which the technology evolves comes from an information base that has inherent biases, then whether it's a human that has implicit bias or a technology that has structural bias, it's still a problem. Now, technology might well be the answer. And so, you know, I love it when I get a note on my phone from my NM and it tells me something that my own physician wants me to know. That's incredibly convenient. That's great. But is that the way everybody else in the world experiences healthcare? I don't think so. So that in and of itself is a bias towards people with resources. But I think if we can be smart about technology, remove the inherent bias so that we don't have data-driven biases in addition to behavioral biases, and I think it is a good solution.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And maybe we do have there's a few more questions we have from the audience that have already asked to ask questions. But if others of you are thinking about a question, maybe just let Michael know, and I think we have an opportunity for a couple more questions. So I'm going to go to the next question that I know is out there. This is actually submitted by one of our medical students you just met, Adam. Adam was very interested in making sure that he had a chance to speak with you, and he's as you know, a medical scientist program pre-doctoral fellow. We just had a conversation with him. Adam, I believe you're still here. Is that correct? There we go. So Michael, if we want to give Adam the microphone, he has a question for Dr. Yancey. Again, for some of you that might have a question in your mind, let Michael know. We'll get you the mic. Okay.
Hi, Dr. Yancey again. My name is Adam. I'm an MD PhD student here at UIC, currently pursuing my PhD in the Department of Biochemistry. And when I was thinking of a question I wanted to ask you, I came across one that you had posed yourself that was way more articulate and insightful than I could have posed. So I wanted to hear your response to your own question. So in your Wikipedia page, it says that you do not believe that health disparities in our country can be solved by the creation of new policies, but instead by asking the question, how can we interject compassion, civility, and concern for all communities and not allow some communities to remain marginalized? And particularly for those of us in medicine and research who are often downstream of these issues, how can we best contribute to these issues?
So, Adam, thank you very much. Let me give you the backstory on that commentary. Every year, as we welcome the medical school class to Northwestern, there's a Founders Day ceremony, and one faculty member is given the privilege of addressing the medical students and their family members, and my turn came up in 2014. And I wanted something that would be very transparent, very memorable, would be brief, and they could walk out of the room with it. So I told the families and, of course, the medical students that there were three things important for the next 4 years. Be competent. That doesn't just mean get a C. That means be capable of doing exactly what your license is supposed to enable. Be civil. Be able to interact with other people, not like yourself, from whatever perspective you start. Be able to listen, be able to engage with others. So be civil and be compassionate. Remember that in this space, in this room, those of us that are either college educated or seeking healthcare careers or already hold terminal degrees, in many regards, we may not be the top 1%, but we're in the top 5%. So if you're sitting in this room, you have privilege. And be certain that you don't let that privilege take you away from having compassion to help others. And so in that regard, my commentary was intended to say that if we can all inculcate these inherent principles of humanism, being civil, having compassion, and being competent, we don't need a whole lot of policy to be able to do the right thing at the right time for the right patient under the right circumstances. But because we're not always competent and not always civil and sometimes not compassionate, then policy is the poor surrogate, the poor tool that we use to try to force that behavior. But if we can aim for the high bar, competent, civility, and compassionate, then the policy becomes perfunctory. But it's only when those things are missing when we need to really focus on policy. And as you've seen, most policy is inadequate and imperfect.
Great. Thank you so much, Adam and Dr. Yancey, for that question. We have another question from the audience. Dr. Calhoun, would you like to introduce yourself and then ask your question?
Sure. I'm Beth Calhoun. I'm Assistant Vice Chancellor here in Population Sciences. So one of the favorite things in my career has been being a mentor. And it's one of the things we don't reward much, right, in academics, right? In T32, you don't get paid to be a mentor. But the most moving story today for me was your high school program, right? That's fantastic, right? And how do we scale that, right? How do we get past the structure? Is technology something we can do? How do we as leaders reach into that pipeline earlier, right? That, to me, is powerful. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on that and sort of help us feel motivated to sort of get behind that.
So, Dr. Calhoun, thank you so much. I really love talking about the Northwestern Scholars Program. This year, we've just reached out to Daniel Hill Williams College Prep and DuSable, and so we're bringing on another cohort for the first time this summer, which will effectively double our size. I'm grateful to our institution because they give us a lead resource bucket of about $200,000 a year to be able to hire staff and bring the program to fruition, but we don't pay any physician faculty. I mean, this is out of your altruism. This is because you want to make a difference. And all you have to do is see one kid open his or her eyes. I'll tell you a story. Last summer, it was about orthopedics. These kids went crazy with bone saws. They could not wait to go to the simulation lab, the one you have up here on 4th and 5th floor. And I mean, they went crazy with bone saws. But that going crazy about bone saws meant they went crazy studying the orthopedic conditions. And so on the last day of the program, I'm on the front row listening to these high school students speak articulately about complex orthopedic conditions. Why? Because they got excited about that. I don't need a paycheck for that. I sit there and I'm like, okay, this is good stuff. This is why I get up in the morning. This is part of my passion, to see this next generation. Now, everybody's got bandwidth, and we have to pay for our time. As a senior leader, we have a little bit more latitude with how we spend our time. But there's got to be room, there has to be room for us to nurture and mentor the next generation. There just has to be room. When we get to health systems that don't allow us to do that kind of outreach, then we've gotten worse in being efficient. We've gotten very mechanical. We can't do that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yancey. It's a very important question, because I think this is the pipeline issue, and getting people excited and energized to learn is the secret sauce here. And all of us too. I mean, I think we need to continue to learn. The world is changing, and you've got to find time in your day to learn, to read, and at least with Dr. Yancey's, he's an editor of a journal, getting the word out, making sure we're staying top of mind. But really, reading broadly, I think healthcare, medicine, nursing, biostatistics, whatever it is, that's fine. But also having the ability to read more broadly, so that you stay connected with the community that's all around us. So, I guess I want to give a few minutes to Dr. Vandenhoek. Many of you know that he is the founder of the Champions program that also thinks a lot about pipeline, and wanted to give him a chance to maybe talk about it or ask Dr. Yancey a question. Again, an audible, I hope you don't mind, Terry, but he can't leave. It's a little bit, it's going to be hard for him to run away here. So questions for Dr. Yancey as it relates to Champions.
So thanks for the opportunity, Jerry. I guess it gets at a bigger question, something that all of us are very aware of, and that is that we really would like to have a workforce in our healthcare system that looks like the patients we serve. There are some wonderful things that happen when you see that, and there's still a gap. And certainly a pipeline program is a start, but it gets at how do we do a better job with our resident recruitment, GME. Do you have any thoughts on how we make that better and close that gap?
Terry, I have a whole lecture on this. This is really a critical conversation, because I want to correct everyone right now. I mean, I'm glad that Ronnie's in the room to hear me say this. Everything we do about championing diversity and trying to get a population of healthcare providers that looks like the population we serve, that's okay. That's not why you do diversity. It's not about representativeness. It's about excellence. Let me tell you what I mean. When you're dealing with sameness, you get the same result. Imagine a bowl of marbles in my hand, and all the marbles are tan, light tan. That doesn't attract much interest. It doesn't give you any other sense of, well, there's a bowl of marbles there. What happens when there's a bowl of marbles and there's 18 different colors in the bowl? Well, that's fascinating. That's interesting. So that's a simple example, but what it's telling us is that it's not diversity of representativeness, getting the bowl of marbles with different colors. It's about what those colors do. Those colors incite you to think differently. Those colors energize you to see a different possibility. It's about diversity of thought. It's about diversity of ideation. It's about getting ideas from places you never received them before so you can build better systems. And so, yes, we can count the metrics and we can post our annual diversity numbers and we can thump our chests, but that doesn't excite me. What excites me is when we get people in the room that have a different perspective, a different history, and give us a different idea. Corporate America has figured this out. That's why you see so many more women in corporate America now, because they know to listen to women and they get ideas they never got before. They're doing the same thing now with ethnicity, with race, with disabilities, with sexual preference. This is making corporate America better, more facile, more dynamic, more responsive to the community, because they're listening to all domains of the community. This is not just about having the right face when we see someone that comes in a door. This is about having the right idea. It's a totally different game. And so I think that's what we need to be. Now, the next question Terry needs to say is that, okay, that sounds well and good. How do we get there? We either change leaders or we change leaders. Now, what does that mean? That means we either look at our leadership, and I'm part of that now. I'm no longer from the outside looking in. I'm on the inside and people looking at me. We need to have leaders that are willing to adopt culturally affirming positions for the kaleidoscope of people with whom they engage. So if leaders can change and can understand the importance of respecting and accommodating other perspectives, that's great. But if leaders are unwilling to do that, if ultimately leaders are still functioning with the same inherent biases that they've always had, and everyone in here, including me, has bias. Not a single person should raise their hand if I say, who in this room is unbiased? You're lying. Everybody in this room has bias. But if you don't have leaders willing to recognize their biases, listen and change, then you need to get different people to be leaders. So you either change leaders or you change leaders, and that's how you get there. This is exactly what we've done. I looked at our metrics this week. Our residency training programs are over 20% diverse now. When I first started working as Vice Dean of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, it was at 6%. Our medical school entering class is now 30% diverse. If you add sexual identity diversity to it, it's over 30%. 1 out of 3 first-year medical students at Northwestern comes from a group previously underrepresented or poorly acknowledged in medicine. That's only because leadership changed and said, this is important. And you know what? It's a better medical school now. And so I have a bit of force when I have this conversation, because this is where I have a restlessness. This is when we have the moment to change for the good, for the good. So think about those things.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much. This has been a remarkable conversation. This is a great pleasure to sit alongside Dr. Yancey and just listen and learn. I have to say, these are aspects of things I did not learn listening to you on this Connect Steering Committee. And I think part of the vision here of having these chats is to kind of push us a little bit, interact, learn from each other, and again, invite all of you here to, maybe you've met somebody new today coming in, interact with each other, learn from each other. So as we close our session today, I'm sure I can speak for everyone when I say that this conversation has been a pleasure, stimulating, helping us think a little differently. I've now started to appreciate the importance of alliteration in 3 letters. I can see these 3 words. I need to start thinking about it that way. For all of you who are deans or vice presidents, vice chancellors, take note. Things comes in 3s here. But we've learned a lot.
So you know why that is. This is where you would know without me telling you this. He told you that I'm kind of reckless. I'll ad lib in a minute. When I was in med school, my pathology professor, Horton Johnson, was a remarkable teacher. He gave me the only test I ever failed. I was so angry. I said, how did this happen? But he taught us this. If you only know one thing about something, you don't know much. But if you at least know 3 things about something, you will forever be reasonably well informed. And so that 3 is stuck in my head since I was a second-year medical student doing pathology. And so I always try to keep 3 concepts clear about everything that I'm trying to consider.
Fantastic. So 3, don't forget. So as we bring this conversation to a close, we wanted to present Dr. Yancey a token of our appreciation, and we have a special, we're supposed to officially call it a plaque. I'm not sure entirely why now, but it is apparently a plaque, but it's actually a crystal. So if you're willing to stand up, Dr. Yancey, would like to share with you on behalf of Dr. Bob Barish, Vice Chancellor for Health Affairs, we'd like to offer you the Distinguished Scholar Series plaque as a way of remembering us as you go about your day. Hopefully you'll put it in a place that others will see and inspire others who come to your office to ask questions about what was this thing that was going on at UIC. And want you to know that we are recording this session. It'll be on our website, and I suspect we'll have a few more people listening to you. So thank you very much.